Welcome back to my channel. We don't know what we're calling this thing yet, but I'm Natasha Hastings, and we are reviewing the series called Sprint on Netflix, and this is my review for episode 2. So this episode was called Queen. I literally just finished watching it, and I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. It was very mental healthy. Or maybe that's the way that I digested it. I don't know. Um, but we open up with Sha'Carri Richardson introducing herself, introducing a bit of how she feels. I got a little bit of a, I don't know. I don't know what you call it, but she made the statement. She has a belief: you look good, you feel good, you do good. And I was like, I can relate. I used to say something very similar, but also admiring the fact that the sport has come a very long way. And when I was flamboyant like Sha'Carri in the beginning, I received a lot of criticism for it. And like I mentioned in my previous review, the sport needs personalities, and Sha'Carri is out there expressing herself. Sha'Carri, among other female athletes, emphasis on female athletes, but I'll just leave it there. But she looks good, she feels good, and if she feels good, she's doing good. And that was it for me. So then we get a bit of some commentary from MJ, where he kind of emphasizes, and I believe that Sha'Carri kind of busted this a little bit, but he emphasized that in the sport of track and field, you don't really make it, or you're not great until you win medals. And actually, am I wrong? Did Atto say that? Either MJ or Atto said that, but there was this emphasis placed on, in track and field, you're not great based on running fast times. You become great by winning medals. I wrote in my notes that she defied that. And I say that because it went on to cover how Sha'Carri's first couple of years as a pro, she didn't make the team. Or if she did make the team, she didn't make it out of the rounds. So when they showed actually her winning the NCAA championship, a bit of nostalgia. I was actually at that meet at the time. I lived in Austin, Texas, which is where the NCAA champs was. But so I remembered watching all of that, watching her run 10-7 in college, and then also kind of watching her kind of take a couple of years to find her stride and have to deal with the media and fans, questioning and saying things out loud about, can she live up to the hype? Can she live up to the expectation? So it was interesting to kind of replay that, because I think, and I want to say this, and I hope that this is delivered in a way that is well received, because I think it was important to illustrate that, because I have to acknowledge Sha'Carri brought millions of eyes to the sport that we did not have once upon a time. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but Sha'Carri brought eyes to the sport. And the eyes that she brought to the sport probably might be a little naive of those years before she became Sha'Carri Richardson, if you will. And I know they are, because even as someone who witnessed it and watched it, right, this documentary was a reminder that, oh yeah, she did have a couple of years of she had to find her stride. She wasn't getting on the teams right away. She ran 10-7 in college, and then it took a while for her to get back there, right? So again, another reason why I think these things are so important when I say these things, these docuseries, in telling the full story of the athlete, the full journey. And even this is not the full story, but it gives a bit more color, nuance, detail to what these athletes have been through and are going through. All right, so I'll put a pin there. We go into following her training group. Again, another bit of insight where it's kind of like, oh, wow, like look at, some other familiar faces on the track. We see some of her training partners, Twanisha Terry, TT Terry, a few others of her training partners. And then we are introduced to Dennis Mitchell, who is her coach, also an Olympian. I loved an Olympic gold medalist, no less. And we saw that he won one of his medals with, I believe Leroy Burrell was on there, and Carl Lewis. It was Carl Lewis's last Olympics in Barcelona. But I love the interesting story. They didn't give us any details, but MJ kind of telling us, the first time he met Dennis, they almost got into a fight, but also alluding to some of that being, his competitive edge, which we later on see that Dennis has also brought that energy into how he coaches his athletes. So we're further introduced into another thing that I brought up in episode 1 review. I keep hinting that if you haven't watched it, go back and watch that review as well. But USA versus Jamaica, and in the sprints in particular, somewhere further along in the episode, someone said, sprinting is the national sport in Jamaica. And I was like, nothing truer could be said, right? And again, we get a bit of the history, excuse me, the history of Gail Devers versus Marlene Ottey, Allison versus, I have to remember to say everyone's first and last name, so bear with me. Allison Felix versus Veronica Campbell Brown, right? They didn't go into the relay rivalries, but that's there too. And then, the dominance that Jamaica has had from, I don't remember if this was, I don't think this was like explicitly covered, but Jamaica has won the women's 100, 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020. In 2022, the Jamaican women swept the world championships in the women's 100, right? And so we get this history into this USA versus Jamaica rivalry. And I love, again, my girl Allison in there, where it's like, we didn't come there to lose. We're coming there to win. And again, kind of giving breath to what this rivalry is like. I think it was Atto who said it, think about the Yankees, the Red Sox, Dallas and Washington. Like, these rivalries are serious. Again, Dennis talking about, what he wants to bring as a coach, right? In his day, Team USA was the dominant team, but now we see the rest of the world becoming more competitive. And he says that he's a little disheartened that Jamaica is dominant. He says it out loud. Again, talk about language and talk about firmly speaking what you feel and what you believe and then backing it up, right? But he also goes on to say that he believes that he has the team to win. Now, I'm going to have to contain myself a little bit, right? Because we know the outcome of certain things, particularly some of the track meets that we're following. And as I'm watching this, I'm starting to see that maybe this is where some of the disappointment maybe is, where some people are watching, where we know the outcomes of, the 2023 World Championships and the Diamond League race that we're going to get into that was covered in this track meet. So there is a bit of predictability. However, I greatly appreciate the buildup and the behind the scenes of what went into each of these athletes' performance and showing up. So then we go to Kingston, Jamaica, and we are introduced to Shericka Jackson. And this is where, for me, I was like, oh, we are taking a mental health turn here, whether it was intentional or not. I thought it was incredibly vulnerable, honorable, all of the things for Shericka to admit. And I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit, but she explains that she had a mental breakdown after the Tokyo 2021 games. Tokyo 2020 games, but they were in 2021. And so, you know, initially when we're introduced to her, she's asked a question about, you know, being the future of Jamaica's women's sprints, and she doesn't want to comment on that, right? So again, speaking of confidence, and in Shericka's case, I am not treating Shericka. Shericka is not my client. Everything that I'm saying is purely speculation, purely my opinion. But in her body language, in the way that she speaks, I don't know that it's coming from a place of lack of confidence versus, you know, adjusting to being in the spotlight, adjusting to now having the target on her back. You know, she started out, for those of you that don't know, again, Shericka started out as a quarter miler. Actually, I'm gonna throw myself in here. In 2016, Shericka was the bronze medalist in the women's 400, and I was the 4th place finisher. But since then, Shericka has moved down, and she now runs the 200, 100. The 200 being her stronger event, but she's down there in the all-time list in the women's 100 as well. So, again, she's adjusting to being in that spotlight. We see her go to a restaurant, and Jamaica is a small island. If you are, Jamaica is a small island, and track and field is the sport in Jamaica, and sprint is the sport in Jamaica. And so we see her go to get something to eat, and, you know, she's having a conversation that you can visibly see that she is uncomfortable. But you also see this fan that is like, you know, really impressed with her. Again, kind of another one of those conversations where it's like, do you think what you're saying is helpful, or do you think she wants to have this conversation with you? You are, as a fan, like eating up this experience and, you know, wanting to have that experience with her. But, you know, some people don't do well with having to be in that sort of position. I myself, I say I'm socially awkward, or I am socially awkward. And so sometimes it is, I've never been on that level, right? But sometimes it is a bit awkward when I'm put into, I'm really comfortable, you guys. And I'm not editing that out. But sometimes it is uncomfortable when you're having these one-on-one interactions and you don't know the person. And, you know, sometimes people are good with small talk, sometimes they're not. So we get a bit of insight into that. We do see a little bit of Shericka's training situation. We are introduced to MVP Track Club. Another history lesson, MVP Track Club is responsible for the likes of your Asafa Powell, your Shelly Ann Fraser-Price, your Elaine Thompson. Now, all 3 of those athletes eventually left MVP, but nonetheless, also while MVP had a ton of success in MVP. And then we have Shericka Jackson. We're introduced to Paul Francis. I can't help myself. I'm supposed to be reviewing the episode, but like there's information that I feel like you got to get the context. Like I have to give the full. So Paul Francis is the brother of Frano. I don't know Frano's first name, but Frano comes from Francis. Frano is the MVP head coach, director. He is the guru of MVP. Paul Francis is his brother. Paul has now essentially taken over coaching MVP, but Frano is still there. Frano is coaching. Frano, his influence is clear on the group, okay? But Paul, what I found interesting, made no qualms about saying, Shericka is his favorite. And I was like, that's interesting for a coach to say. And for a coach to say with such a large training group. And is this a glimpse into why some of the athletes maybe chose to go elsewhere? Speculation. I don't know. It's just a question that I had, that if I heard correctly, Paul said, you know, this is one of his favorites. If not his favorite, one of his favorites is Shericka. And again, heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? And he also acknowledges her shoulders are carrying the burden of who is carrying this Jamaican torch, right? Who is going to continue dominating women's sprints? Shelly Ann Fraser-Price. Shelly's my age. If y'all don't know, I turned 38 in a couple of days. By the time this is published, I'm probably already 38. So she's on her way out, right? Elaine is older, not much. Actually, her and Shericka might be the same age, actually, but Elaine is struggling with injuries, like, right? But we're also seeing that Shericka has more of a, I don't like to use the word fragile, because fragile is, that's not the word. But admittedly, she's dealing with issues of dealing with the pressures. And we go into her saying, you know, she liked being the star high school athlete. There was no pressure. Now at this stage, there is a higher level of expectation. She acknowledges that her nerves were the cause of that race in 2021. Again, a bit of history. Shericka was, if not a pick to win the gold medal, for sure a pick to medal in the women's 200 in Tokyo. She went out there and did not make it out of the first round. It looked like she jogged, which I can't help myself. If you're fit enough, if you're the top gun, if, you are that much more talented than the rest of the field, you typically conserve your energy through the round. So seeing an athlete, not run the first round all out 100% is not, out of the norm. However, there was speculation. Did she misjudge that? Was she told to do that by her coaches? Like, did the rest of the field run faster than she expected? Like, all these things were flying around, but ultimately she did not make it out of the first round. And she goes ahead and tells us, I didn't advance, it was my nerves. And she goes on to say that I had a mental breakdown after Tokyo. So we get this scene of her and a friend. I don't know if I missed who the friend was. I didn't see a title card for him, but it seems like they're having a glass of wine. And she acknowledges that she is now in a happier space, which I think is important. Something that I often emphasize when I'm working with athletes, that, you are far more than your performance on the field. You are far more than the expectations that everyone else has of you. And seeking happiness in your life, in your personal life, ultimately affects your performance, and affects your performance in a positive way. So I was happy to see that, she could acknowledge, like, hey, I went through these struggles. I went through these qualms, if you will, but I'm now in a better space. And I want to backtrack a little bit because I don't know if Sha'Carri said this before or after, but I want to make sure that I get to say it, because this is why I felt like this episode was kind of mental healthy, was that mental healthy. Where did that come from? Anyway, Shericka made comments, and this is not the first time we've seen her make these comments, because again, if you're following track and field, you've seen her interviews, you've seen where she said, like, the media people, they get to say whatever they want to you, and y'all have no idea what it feels like to be performing and doing your job in front of millions, and understand that there's still a human being on the other side of that. And I can't say enough how that is missed by so many. And every athlete, from your favorite elite professional down to your middle school kid that is on social media and scouts are predicting them to be the next best thing, goes through having to hear people coach from their couch, their negative opinions, their this and that. Like, can't say it enough. And I'm also going to take this moment to say, having watched, again, Sha'Carri from that girl from college to now, And I think Atto even said it in this documentary. She's saying all of the right things. And not only is she saying all of the right things, she is backing up the things that she's saying. And that's one of the things watching her the past couple of years that I've enjoyed. Like, we have literally seen an evolution of Sha'Carri before our eyes. So there. Let's get back to, Sha'Carri. So we go back to Sha'Carri's sit down interview style, if you will. And again, kind of tapping into what are these athletes' languages. And Sha'Carri is talking her stuff. I actually see quite a bit of parallels between her and Noah in terms of being big personalities. You know, we saw her talking trash in the workouts, and you know, she said that talking trash kind of, you know, she loves it. She wants to see more of it in the sport. We've been hearing that for years from different athletes, that like, we want to see the rivalries, we want to see trash talking, right? But you know, we want to, it's respectful and fun, right? But you know, she made the comment that it's also a way to sort of direct the energy, and there is a lot of energy, right? Training and going after these big goals. But she also talks about Shericka, and she respects her, right? She respects her as a competitor, and also goes on to say that Shericka brings out the best competitor in her as well. So again, sort of this positive language, this seeing someone as your challenge, but also this challenge is an opportunity for me to show up and for me to show my work and who I am and what I can be. And I just thought that was so cool to see. We also further go on to learn how she has learned to take some of that ridicule and the things that the media and fans and et cetera have said about her, and sort of use that for her motivation as opposed to, you know, to her detriment. So if you will, we kind of see the juxtaposition again of the two different athletes, and sort of going from both of them, you know, like now being the ones that they're in their primes, carrying the burden of being the next queen, right? Hence the title of this episode, right? But how, for one, that expectation can be too much, but for another one, she uses that as her motivation. So again, Sha'Carri talks about, you know, we see her talking to her grandmother, but talking about like knowing who she is. The last thing that she said that I was like, ooh, we gotta get on this. We gotta talk about this. Where she says she believes her coach is the best coach in the world. And I have imperative written in all caps on my paper. That being her belief in her coach and her belief in what it is that she goes out there and does every day. Your relationship with your coach is imperative. It is. You have to have faith in what you are doing when you go out there, right? And when I mean what you go out there, the training that you do, when your coach says that I know and believe that you can do X, Y, Z, you got to have faith in that. You got to know that your coach is not blowing smoke up your ass. Like, I cannot emphasize that anymore. And when she said that, I was like, this is part of why she has become so dangerous, right? Because when you and your coach are locked in like that. So, okay, we get to the Diamond League track meet. You know, we see the athletes scoping out the stadium. This is normal stuff where, you know, you get your pre-meet in, you get to feel out the track. You know, a track is a track is a track. However, you still got to go out there and, you know, feel it out. You probably know your lane assignment by then, so you want to feel out your lane. Like, all of that was normal. I appreciated this, again, juxtaposition, comparison, if you will, of the ladies warming up. And I also appreciated bringing in the coaches, right? Where you see Dennis is doing his trash talking. Dennis says it out loud, like, you know, we want to get in our competitor's head. Beating you starts with getting into your mind. It's not, we're not even waiting for the gun to go off. I'm gonna start now. getting into your head. I'm gonna be loud. I'm gonna, allow my athlete to be the big personality that she is. She's out there with her headphones on. She's dancing. She's getting up in your face. You didn't speak. She's letting you know, I am sure, I am confident, I'm ready. You didn't speak. Like, psychological warfare. Psychological warfare. And again, I'm telling you, that is what the warm-up area is, what the call room is. Like, the race starts before the gun even goes off. It does. But then again, we also kind of see, it was interesting because Paul was kind of like, not so much. It was like the presence was to be known. Like, I put those cones down. She can't get in right there. Come on, let's go. That looked good, right? But also just a little bit more reserved than Dennis. And, acknowledging that the psychological warfare exists, but not necessarily engaging in it as much as we see Dennis doing it. So we get into the race. I'm leaving out the part that it's also Shericka's birthday on this race day. But we get into the race. Shericka has a great start. She's leading for about 70, 80 meters. But if you know anything about Sha'Carri does not have the best start. However, her top end speed, as long as she stays in her phases and doesn't panic and rush, everyone comes back to her. That's track talk. Sha'Carri won. She won in 10:76. Shericka was second. So we get into this conversation about the win being vindication for Sha'Carri, right? Because again, we started this episode off with, she hasn't really lived up to this hype, right? She hasn't made the team, she hasn't made the team. We'll just leave it at that. And then now we're going into the World Championships in Budapest. So this was the race, right, to set up going into the World Championships. And so again, we're shown this comparison of Sha'Carri, after the race telling Shericka happy birthday. I was like, let me rewind that and see what was but Sha'Carri is paying respect to her competitors. Ooh, pardon me. Paying respect to her competitors, each and every one of the ladies, right? But then we also later see her having a conversation with her agent. That was her agent with her, Ronaldo Nehemiah. Go do your history. He is an agent, but he's also the former world record holder in the men's 110 hurdles. Again, if we gonna talk about where we going, know where you come from. But she's also telling him, I just won my race and the media is asking me about Shericka. Don't ask me about Shericka. Ask me about my race. I'm with you when you're right. I'm with you when you're right? But also the media has a job to do. They're going to ask their questions whether we like it or not. But so we have this juxtaposition of her, having a great race, and then we're then met with Shericka back in the hotel packing her bag. And, she makes this comment about bouncing back from a bad race. And I wrote the word perfection down, right? And this is where track and field or any sport is interesting. There's one winner, everybody else is a loser, right? But then when you go back and look at the race, I don't remember what time Shericka actually ran, but I'm sure it was no slower than 10:09, right? Was it a bad race? She didn't win. She ran fast, but she didn't win, right? But there is a level of perfection, a standard that athletes are held to that is unimaginable. If you don't do what elite athletes do, you cannot imagine what that pressure is. And we're talking about a millisecond, 100th of a second, 1/10 of a second. I can't remember if it was Dina or Gabby who said it, but you're talking about the 1% of the 1% of the 1%, right? And so again, a glimpse into the pressure, the expectation, and what this what the effects of that is on the athlete. So lastly, oh no, let me not get ahead of myself. She does also mention, she being Shericka Jackson, if there are mistakes to be made, now is the time to make the mistake. Again, interesting that the word mistake is being used, because from watching it, what was the mistake, right? I've had some races before where, yes, there's no such thing as a perfect race. Even Sha'Carri having won the race, I'm sure Dennis was like, oh, we need to fix this. Your start could have been better, right? You weren't first out of the blocks, right? So there's no such thing as a perfect race. But then sometimes I just got beat, right? Like, there can only be one winner. So, but if the mistakes are to be made, they're to be made now. I'd rather make them now as opposed to making them at the World Championships. This is sort of where we're seeing Shericka's post-race thoughts going. But then she also says, I don't expect anyone to bring their B game. I'd like for my competitors to bring their A game. Again, language of a champion, language of like, this challenge is an opportunity for me to step up and show myself. So yeah, so that was that. We did also get a bit of the coaches after race interaction. Dennis went up to Paul and, said what he said to him. And then I'm probably going to get some heat for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway, because Paul made the comment that Dennis said what he said. He has to say what he has to say to him for his own ego, or I don't think ego was the word that he used, but for his own mind. That's what it was. It was something like along the lines of like, for him to know that his goals are being met. But Paul made the comment that, but it doesn't bother me. It doesn't get into my head and in my, when he said that, I was like, that is such a Jamaican thing to say. I can say that. I'm half Jamaican. Half of my family is Jamaican. I love my people, but I just felt like that was such a Jamaican thing to say. But it was also, again, another example of that psychological warfare, right? Are you going to go up to your competitor? And the coaches are even in this competition, right? Are you going to go up to your competitor after the race? What are you going to say to them? Are you the trash talker? Are you the more reserved one? So, thought this episode was great. I'm enjoying watching this series. Episode 3 will be up next. As usual, comment, like, subscribe. Give me your feedback. Let me know what you want more of. And stay tuned for episode 3.